Okay, we finished basically the malacha that's called teichen, grinding, and that type of stuff. So the next, what follows after teichen in food processing is what's called losh. Losh means kneading dough. K-N-E-A, not N-E-E. K-N-E-A-D, kneading dough. Now the concept of kneading dough, where was it done in the Mishkan? Obviously when they made the lechem aponim, they made the bread, so they had to grind the wheat into flour. That was the grinding aspect. And then they made dough out of the flour. So how do you make dough? You put water into the flour and you create dough, and then you bake it, right? So that's how it went, the grinding, and it's the order of the malachos. We didn't learn all the malachos, but that's the order. You have grinding, and then you have kneading, and then baking that we learned already. That was bishul. So biblically, it's forbidden to make something kneading, but the definition of kneading then means you combine. Grinding and kneading are really opposite. Grinding, you're taking one thing and you're grinding into small particles. Losh is the opposite. You're taking all the small particles, and with water or liquid, you're actually making into one piece again. So it's the opposite, but both are in the process of making bread. So min ha'Torah is biblically forbidden if you make a thick batter, because that's what was done in the Mishkan. They made a thick batter to bake the bread, so they made thick dough, and that's the malacha itself biblically. Now, there's an argument in halacha which really doesn't matter. The only question is it biblically forbidden or rabbinically forbidden? So bottom line is still forbidden. Now, according to many opinions, if I have flour, okay, and I just pour water over it without doing anything to it, it's called kneading. Even if I just poured the liquid water over the flour, it's already called kneading. Other opinions say, no, you have to actually make it, you have to knead it. You have to, like you knead dough. So that's the difference. Some poskim say that you're chayav just adding water, even if you don't mix it. Most poskim say that you have to actually do the kneading process. But even according to all opinions, the only question is it biblically forbidden or rabbinically forbidden. But just pouring water over flour, over anything that we're going to learn, is also rabbinically forbidden. So in a practical sense, it really doesn't matter. There's also an halacha like this. You have different types of batters. And this will matter what is biblically forbidden, rabbinically forbidden, what you're allowed to do certain ways, and what there's no question doing. Okay, that's what the whole malacha of kneading is. So making a thick batter definitely is forbidden. By the way, this is not so, it's very common, by the way, these things. Just to throw out cases, I mean, you want to make baby cereal. Okay, so how do you make baby cereal? You take oatmeal from the box, baby oatmeal, right? Basic oatmeal cereal. And then you had hot water. Is another issue with bishul, but that's a separate issue that we learned already. But one now you can take milk or water and mix it into this baby cereal, which is basically flour. That's what it is. And then I mix it together, and it could become thick. It could become a thick batter, or it could become a thin batter, right? And then I'll give you another example, which is completely allowed. If you take something like coffee, okay, instant coffee, and you pour water, forget bishul, you just pour a lot of water over it, that's not called kneading, because it's just a liquid. You didn't knead it, it's not even thick at all. It's just, like dissolving any liquid. Food drink, like Kool-Aid or something like that type of stuff. Or chocolate, milk chocolate that you scoop out. That's a different story. We'll get there why it's a little bit different. But let's not jump the gun. Okay, let's go systematically. So biblically, if it's thick batter, there's no way you could do it. It's biblically forbidden, you're not allowed to do it. If it's a thinner batter, if it's completely no batter, It's just like we said, you pour water over coffee or sugar, or that's not an issue. Not kneading at all in any way. What happens if it's what's called belila? Belila, by the way, it's very important terms. Belila ava means a thick. Ava means thick. Belila means a mixing. Belila ava means a thick batter. That's biblically forbidden according to all opinions. Belila raka means it's a batter. It's consistency to it, but it's pourable. It's soft. You can pour it. Okay, you can pour it from one container. Bread, you can. A piece of dough, you can't pour from one container to the next. You can pick it up and change containers, but you can't pour it from one to the next. But bli raka means it's consistency. There is a consistency to it, but it's soft, meaning you can. It's a pourable batter, so to speak. So to make a blila raka, a softer batter, just to do it itself is rabbinically forbidden, because you might come to make a thicker batter. But the Chachamim allowed certain times that you could do for food, and there's a big question in halacha is, remember we learned by many malachos that you could do it like boiler, you could do it right before eating, but not earlier. So now the question is, can I knead those things that I'm allowed to knead? Can I do it? Do I have to do it right before eating, or do I could do it for later? That's not for now. But anyway, by the way, this whole din of Losh does not only apply to food. It applies, let's say you're going to add water to sand, you're going to add water to clay or to earth. It could be a malacha of kneading. That means if you're going to have a piece of mud, okay, you have mud outside. So if, let's say, you have grass, we're digressing a little bit. What happens if you have a grass? Okay, you're in your backyard. You're not allowed to pour water on the grass because you're making it grow. That's part of the malacha of zereah, which is planting. Part of planting is watering the lawn, which makes it grow. So therefore, there's a lot of dinim. By the way, if you have a Shabbos meal in your backyard, there's a lot of dinim involved. What you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, because inevitably people spill drinks. And then you're going to pour, by mistake, you're going to pour water on the ground, it's going to make it zuriyah. But that's a separate issue. But what happens if you sit standing and let's say you can carry whatever, you're standing on the beach, okay? And I'm going to pour a little bit of water onto the sand. That's mamish losh. That's mamish kneading. You're combining. That's why we learned to make a sand castle on Shabbos. Yeah, to make it. Let's say you have a sandbox in a shul. Let's say, so you're allowed to carry. No question. Like this, you can't carry by the ocean. You can't carry. But let's say you're in a sandbox where there's sand. Okay, so. Just to show you, when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, you have to keep so many different things in mind. Normally, sand is muktzah. It's not an object. It's completely muktzah. Okay. Now, sand is not muktzah, though. We learned anytime you designate muktzah for permissible usage, not just temporarily, but for regular usage, then it's not muktzah. So, if you designate a sandbox for kids to play in, so then it's not, the sand is not muktzah anymore, because you designated it to play with. So it's not muktzah. But what happens, you kids want to build a sand castle, right? So how do you build a sand castle? You can't just take the sand and stick it together. It's not going to work. You need to take water, right? You pour water. That's what the kids normally would do, right? And they would do it by the ocean. You have to get some water, you pour it onto the sand, so then it becomes kneaded, and then it becomes like a thick, lack of a better word, thick batter, and then you form it and shape it into a house. Okay, so you have a lot of issues. You had number one muktzah, and then you have this malacha that we're learning now, losh, because you're connecting the particles of sand with water. And then you have bona, you're building a building, even though it's temporary, it's still rabbinically forbidden. So I'm saying you have all these things to take care of. So, what happens if you have mud, okay, and you're going to pour water on mud? So mud is particles, and now you're going to pour water on it. So you're actually doing, according to many opinions, biblically forbidden, because even just pouring the water on it is biblically forbidden. But it's definitely rabbinically forbidden. So they're right. I mean, it's just to show halacha. If somebody really needs to go to the bathroom on Shabbos, they're taking a hike somewhere, and they need to go to the bathroom, you can't urinate on top of mud, because it's the malacha of Losh. It doesn't have to be water. It doesn't have to be edibles. It's just, no, halacha talks about that. Because in those days, they didn't have bathrooms like today. They would just go wherever, So, or if you're hiking in a camp somewhere, on a Shabbos, there's no bathrooms around, you're in the forest, whatever, and you're doing a walk. So you have to be careful, all those things, because it doesn't only apply to food. Okay, next is like this. So, what happens if you want to make, let's say, baby cereal? So let's talk about such a case of baby cereal. So you cannot make a thick batter. In other words, you can't add a little bit of milk or a little bit of water and mix it together, because then it's going to be a thick batter. That's biblically forbidden, because it's not pourable, really. So you have to make it in a way that it's not a thick batter, that is technically pourable. It's called, like we said before, belila raka, that you're still able to pour it. But halacha says you could do it right before the meal, according to those opinions, and you have to do it differently than you normally would do it. So what does it mean, differently than you normally would do it? Because Chazal, by Losh, is an interesting, it's not normally rabbinically forbidden. The Chum say, by Losh, if you do it in this way that we're describing, that you could do it, then you're allowed to do it that way. It's permissible. So let's say normally you pour the cereal in first, and then you add the water. So on Shabbos, you have to do the reverse. If you put in the water first, then the cereal, Shabbos you put the cereal in first, then add the water. If you put in the water first, then you put the cereal in first, and then add the water. What happens if there's no set way of doing it? So halacha says first you put in the solid, and then you add the liquid. Okay, so you have to do it differently than you normally would do it. Then you have to make sure that you're not making it a thick batter. Okay, you make it loose, that it's pourable. And then the last thing that needs to be done is, when you mix it, you can't mix it with a spoon or a fork the way you normally mix it. You can't do it like that. You have to mix it with the handle of the spoon, and you can't, so that's not the normal way you're mixing, because normally you mix with the spoon, the bottom part of the spoon. So you turn the spoon over, and you can't even mix it with regular mixing. You have to go crisscross. In other words, you have to do it completely different way of preparing it than you would do it normally, because then the Chum said, we're permitting it, because the whole thing is anyway rabbinic. So if you do it in this way, when they made the decree that even if it's not a thick batter, it's still rabbinically forbidden. So Chacham said, if you do it with these changes, so then you'd be allowed to do it. Okay? So you have to, number one, make it not thick. Number two, you have to do it differently, putting in the ingredients differently, the opposite way that you do it during the week. Thirdly, when you mix it, you have to mix it with the handle of a spoon and a crisscross motion, not the regular way of doing it. So then you would be allowed to do it. That's how you make baby cereal on Shabbos. Again, if you're using hot water, then you have other issues with cooking, and that, so you need a kli shlishi, the various different things that people would need to allow it to be done. Okay, you have to, that spoon should not be used. Okay. Okay, now let's get into practical things. Okay, they talk about matzamel, but that's not so much matzamel. It's not very practical, but again, it's the same thing. You can mix it with your hands, you can mix it with the handle of a, you can't mix, let's say you want to make, what? Instant oatmeal, well, that's baby cereal, basically. Will be the same thing with instant oatmeal, taka. I mean, I was calling that baby cereal. It's really the same thing. But even if you have an adult oatmeal cereal, the instant, oatmeal cereals, so you have that issue. I'll give you an example. To make instant mashed potatoes, you have the powdered mashed potatoes and then you add water to it, so that they all right you're not allowed to do. Why? Because mashed potatoes is a thick consistency. You're not going to have liquidy mashed potatoes. That's not mashed potatoes. So if you're going to make mashed potatoes, which by definition is going to be a thicker batter, so the poskim write that you can't make on Shabbos. It's a thick batter. So you're doing it. Even with a shini, it's not going to help. If somebody by mistake made it, you can eat it. But l'chatchila, you're not allowed to make the food like that, because if it's a thicker thing. So if you make, let's say, oatmeal cereal, it's the same thing. If you normally during the week put the cereal in first and then add the liquid, so now you put the liquid in first and add the cereal, or reverse. And if you don't know what you do during the week or whatever, you don't do it often, so the halacha says you put the cereal in first and then add the liquid. And again, you can't make it a thick batter, and you have to mix it with the handle of a spoon or the handle of a fork, whatever, and crisscross motions, and then you can make that. What?
If you mix tuna with mayonnaise...
Tuna mayonnaise we're going to get too soon. It's a whole different ball game. It's also not so simple. Let's say you want to... okay, it's getting late, but we have to have But what happens, let's say you want to make a tuna salad, egg salad, or let's say you want to... let's say you chop down the eggs, and now you want to add oil to it, or mayonnaise. Now oil might be a bigger problem because oil is liquid, mayonnaise is not necessarily liquid, even though mayonnaise is a binder. To be continued.